Back in 1841, a single warship shows up on the coast of China. And it doesn't just win a battle. No, it completely shatters the lives and even the morals of everyone who sees what it can do. This is the story of what happens when new technology creates a force that's just unstoppable, and the impossible choices that people have to make in its shadow. So, can you imagine you've got this Chinese official, a guy named Shi-Rong, and a veteran Admiral Guan. They're standing on a hill, looking down at the Pearl River, feeling pretty good about their defenses. And then, something impossible crawls out from behind the British fleet. And that's all they can say. What in the world is that? The best way to really understand the story of this ship, the Nemesis, is to see it through the eyes of three people whose worlds were just completely turned upside down. We're talking about a loyal official who was forced to lie, a smuggler who sold out his country's secrets, and a missionary who was haunted by his own side's victory. Okay, so try to put yourself in their shoes. To the Chinese defenders, the Nemesis looked like some kind of monster from another dimension. This is the first time they're seeing a ship made not of wood, but of solid iron. Instead of sails, it has this big funnel just belching black smoke and giant paddle wheels churning up the water. It was just an unnatural, terrifying sight. The power of the Nemesis was just, well, it was overwhelming. Being built of iron, it was basically immune to their cannons, and it had a shallow draft, which meant it could just glide right over all the sandbanks and chains they'd laid as traps. And its weapons? They were something else entirely, firing these devastating things called Congreve rockets. To the Chinese, it could only be one thing: an iron dragon. The very first rocket that the Nemesis fired hit a Chinese war junk right in its ammunition magazine. The ship, the crew, everything was just gone. Instantly atomized. The shockwave was so powerful, it literally blew Shi-Rong and the admiral right off their feet as they watched from the shore. And in that one moment, the war stopped being about strategy. It became about surviving a power that felt almost supernatural. And that event, it kicks off a deep moral crisis. And we're going to start with Shi-Rong. He's this dedicated young official, and suddenly he's trapped between his duty to this proud, ancient empire and the horrifying reality he just witnessed with his own eyes. You have to understand, China's entire strategy just fell apart in a matter of months. First, Shi-Rong's very confident mentor, Commissioner Lin, was proven totally, fatally wrong. Then his replacement tried a much softer approach, a loose rein policy, hoping to appease the British. But that failed too. Why? Because the Nemesis just ignored every single trap and defense they put in its way. So right after seeing the Nemesis just obliterate the fleet, Shi-Rong is grabbed by imperial messengers. He's being summoned by the emperor himself. He's treated like, and this is the actual term, urgent mail. He's rushed north on this brutal, non-stop 13-day journey by boat, by litter, by horseback. He finally gets to Beijing, bruised, exhausted, and sick. So he arrives at the Forbidden City only to walk into a completely different kind of nightmare. The emperor and his entire court, they are completely cut off from reality. They seriously believe the British are just some minor annoyance that they can just swat away. Nobody has told them the truth about how powerless their military has actually become. And this leaves Shi-Rong with an absolutely impossible choice. Does he tell the emperor the truth, that their weapons are useless and the war is already lost, and get executed for treason, which would also endanger his mentor? Or does he tell the lie the court wants to hear, keeping the delusion going and, saving his own skin? Shi-Rong chooses the lie. He tells the emperor that His Majesty already has all the information he needs. He saves himself, but the psychological price is immediate, and it's immense. That very night, he has this incredibly vivid dream where the ghost of his father, who had just recently died, appears and accuses him of the ultimate betrayal, lying to the emperor and disgracing all of his ancestors. So, while Shi-Rong is wrestling with his conscience, another guy sees this war as a pure business opportunity. His name is Neo, a local smuggler. He knew the secrets of the Chinese defenses, and he knew the British would pay top dollar for them. The information he sold was devastatingly simple, but it exposed two absolutely fatal flaws. First, the China's so-called elite soldiers were using these clunky, outdated matchlock muskets. But second, and this was the real killer, the cannons in the coastal forts were fixed in place. They couldn't be aimed. So all the British had to do was find their range, park their ships just outside of it, and then just pick the defenses apart without any risk. And what was the price for betraying his entire country and sealing the fate of thousands of soldiers? $40 silver. For Neo, It was just a simple transaction. But this act really shows you how this huge power imbalance created by British technology just completely warped traditional ideas of loyalty. But here's the thing, this moral crisis wasn't just happening on the Chinese side. Over with the British, you had Cecil Whiteparish, a missionary, who found himself working as an interpreter for a war he absolutely despised. Whiteparish was a devout Christian, right? A man of God. Yet here he was playing a key part in a military campaign whose whole purpose was to force the opium trade on China. He felt a duty to his country, but he was just tormented by the mission he was helping to make possible. You can actually feel this conflict because, through Whiteparish's translation, the British commander himself expressed regret. He said he was especially sad when that gallant old Admiral Guan was killed. Even for the victors, the brutal, one-sided efficiency of their technology created a kind of moral wound. Their weapons made bravery totally irrelevant, and for some of them, the victory just felt hollow. So, when you put these three stories together, the official, the smuggler, and the missionary, you start to see the true impact of the Nemesis. It wasn't just waging war on soldiers and forts, it was waging a war on morality itself. A single piece of technology created a power so lopsided that it just shattered everything in its path. For Shi-Rong, it broke his duty to tell the truth. For Neo, it broke his loyalty to his country. And for Whiteparish, it broke his faith in the justice of his own mission. This overwhelming power forced every single one of them into an impossible moral corner. You know, the story of the Nemesis took place almost 200 years ago, but the question it raises is maybe more relevant now than ever. When a technological leap creates such a massive imbalance of power, what does it do to our core values, to our sense of right and wrong? What happens to our humanity?